Okay, so today I'm gonna be doing a basic trim on my horse Dakota and show you how I just do a basic trim. And also I want to talk about how I start by reading the hoof and things you can look at to kind of get an overview if the hoof is growing in a good way. So Dakota, she's got pretty good feet, and one thing I like to look at is kind of the depth of the hoof. Now she's standing with her hoof in front. I'm just gonna try to get it back there. Whoa. So she's got pretty good depth, they're not flat. They look really good. She's got really strong, good feet. Now her toe is getting a little long, but overall when she grows, it's growing down in the right direction. It's growing down, it's not going flat out this way. So the first thing I like to do is to look at the growth lines, or the dorsal stripes, which they are called. And that's these stripes coming down here. They're vertical and horizontal. And these lines, these dorsal stripes, they're going to tell you how the hoof is actually growing. So you can see on Dakota's feet, all these growth lines, they're growing in balance. They're all kind of going the same way. They're going in a good direction compared to this angle of the hoof, especially when she's standing straight. And also these horizontal ones, they're really nice and pretty balanced all the way around. So what happens is that the hoof can be long at some places. So, for example, on her, you can see the line is going pretty well around here. And at this point, when you're coming here, it's like it's going up a little bit, which means that this part of the hoof is maybe a little too long compared to the rest of the hoof. So I have to be careful with this area and maybe take it down a little bit so it's not going to keep pushing up here. And what happens is if the hoof wall gets too long, where it's not supposed to be long, it's going to push the hairline up. And on many horses I see the hairline is being pushed a lot. Just gonna get her. Whoa. So yeah. Stop. So on a good hoof, the hairline should be longest at the toe, and it should go down equally on both sides. She's just a little ticklish when I'm doing this. Right. So on a good hoof, the toe should be the longest, and it should go a little bit down on each side here. And you can see on her, it's kind of going up a little bit here. Oh. So when you look at the front, it's going kind of up a little bit on both sides there. So I have to be careful with this area and maybe keep it down a little bit more, because you can see the growth lines are getting pushed up a little, and it's not supposed to be like that. So I always look at the hoof pretty good before I start trimming to be sure I'm aware of the hoof condition and how it's growing. And it's really visible on her that on her medial side, medial being the inside part of the hoof, it's going up. And what happens is when I trim this down a bit more, it's gonna fall down pretty fast, maybe in a few days or in a week, depending a little bit on how dry the hoof is and kind of the weather. But I've seen it happening pretty fast, so it's not a big deal. You just gotta be aware of it and yeah, deal with it when it happens. Also, the hoof wall growing up into the skin, it's sharp. So when it's getting pushed up too much, it's going to be painful for the horse to walk on the hoof. And I see many horses where the hairline is kind of really going up there and going up there on both sides. And that's because the pillar or the toe quarter is way too long. So now I've kind of been reading the hoof. I know what's going on with the hoof. So now I'm going to start looking from the underside and start to trim. Yes. So she's pretty due for a trim, and she can go pretty long before I trim the hoof because she's got really good growth. Like I said before, it's growing in the right way. It's growing like down. She's got good depth. A lot of horses, the toe will kind of run away from the hoof and drag the whole hoof in front, like forward instead. But with Dakota, she can go pretty long, the hoof will grow pretty equal, and it's gonna look pretty good. Like this pillar here, pillar being the side of the toe, you can see this is longer than the rest, which is why it's starting to push the hairline up. So here I'm gonna really take down this pillar and make sure they're nice and equal at both sides. Alright, so the first thing I'll be doing is to clean up the frog and kind of take off everything that looks like it's about to fall off anyway. And the important part, wait, she turned. So she thinks it's a little bit unfair because all her friends I just turned them out in the field and she's stuck here trimming her feet. I don't think she thinks that's fair, but she's usually a pretty good girl. So what happens is if you don't clean up the frog, is that it can start to kind of hold a lot of bacteria. Like this, it's kind of bending over, so this part inside here is not getting a lot of air. And then you can have thrush starting to develop. So I'm just cleaning this up. And thrush is this black fungus kind of thing that's growing typically on the frog, but it can grow all places in the hoof. So you gotta be careful and watch. Make sure that if they have thrush, you treat it with a good remedy. But a lot of the times it really helps to just open up the frog and make sure that the frog is not harvesting bacteria or anything like that. Really getting the tip of this. I'm gonna change my knife. This was getting pretty. The hard part about trimming feet as well is keeping your knives sharp. I'm not that great keeping my knives sharp. So also in this area, it's called the central sulcus. You gotta be careful because if you don't clean it out, they can get thrush and it can really go deep in there, so they can get like a hole inside if you don't clean out this area. So you can see this is kind of loose, it's flapping around, just covering up, making sure the frog is not getting any air. So also you can see this kind of black stuff, and if the frog got some cracks or something, and it can be covered up and you can get thrush. She's got a little bit, you can see these small black spots here. So I'm just gonna clean it up a bit and make sure it's not bad. And getting rid of this. It's kind of a little hole there. So I'm just gonna treat it carefully. And I'm gonna clean up this side a bit as well. And you don't want to cut really deep, just like get rid of the hard excess frog. What's up with you? She's trying to eat. You gotta be patient, you know? Just want to get this off. All right. So I try to cut clean so it's not flapping around anything. Like, try to get when I cut the frog, that it's nice and smooth. But if your knife is not super sharp, it's not that easy. And you, my friend, are gonna have to stand still and be patient and not do a lot of stupid things. Alright, so I think now the frog is looking pretty okay. I'm not gonna do more. So, now I want to tell you about the different parts of the hoof. This is the frog, the triangle thing, rubbery thing here. Then you have the bars coming down here, and they're kind of supporting the heel, and the heel will be from this part and back. Like 1/4 of the hoof, more or less. The back part of the hoof, all this is the heel. And then you have the quarter. It's kind of this, from here to here, this area. And then you have the pillar, or the toe quarter. And then you have the toe in front. This in front is the toe. And back here you have the frog stay. And if the horse got good heel, which he has, he will have a good frog stay. And you will see the hairline is pretty straight back here. And all of this is filled up with nice frog. What happens is that if people trim out the heels, which a lot of people do, all of this will be dragged down and forward. And especially if they keep the toe or the pillars too long, everything is kind of going to be dragged. And the foot is going to be flat. And anatomy is not going to be correct. So you got to be careful with this. And make sure to not trim down the heels way too much. And then, of course, this around here will be the sole. And these, which I'm trimming right now, these are the bars. And they are kind of supporting the heel. And inside the hoof, you know, they have a hoof bone. And the hoof bone is shaped inside pretty much like this, you know. So in the back part of the hoof, the only thing supporting, the only hard material is the hoof wall coming up here. So if you trim down all the hoof wall, it's not going to be anything hard supporting the heel anymore, and the hoof is going to be damaged. And all around here is the hoof wall coming out. So, unfortunately, a lot of trimmers have based their trim on maybe a bad Mustang hoof. You know, not all Mustangs have good feet. And they found a hoof with the heels completely trimmed out and used this as kind of a tool or a guide on how hoofs should be. So what I like to do is to measure the heels before I start trimming. And you see she's got really nice, good frog stay. Her heel, everything is okay the way it should be. Her hoof looks great, to be honest. She's got really good feet. So, you go all the way down to the hairline and make a little mark. And I'm going to keep the heels as long as possible. The only thing I don't want is the heels getting too long from up here from the sole, because then they can crack and fall off. But if your horse don't have any heel, you should probably not trim the heels for a while, just to make them grow and support the hoof a little bit better. So I'm measuring here, and I'm trying to keep this line straight from this angle. Down here, she's more or less at 5 centimeter. So I'm making a line here, and that looks pretty well when I compare it with the sole also. And we just gotta put her back where she's supposed to be. Good girl. And then I'm gonna measure the other side as well. Going from this line to the hairline down there. Making a mark at 5. And they're pretty equal, which is really good. The hoof is well balanced. Alright, the next thing you can do is find the apex. The apex is where the frog meets the sole, the place where they kind of merge together. And sometimes it can be a little bit hard to see. But the reason you want to find the apex is to find out the center of the hoof and kind of measure it up and make sure everything is in the right place. Okay, now you gotta be able to not eat in like a little while. If you're not behaving, I may have to put a halter on you. Yes. Whoa. And she's just hungry because it's her time to eat. And then she gets a bit impatient. You know, maybe I should actually put the wheel with the hay. I'm gonna do that. All right, there you go. So she usually is really patient with this, so it's kind of unfair of me to trim her in a moment when she's hungry and it's time for her to eat. I'm just gonna put the hay there. And hopefully she's gonna be a bit more patient. She's not so hungry. All right. So the apex is the area where the sole meets the frog. And you gotta kind of cut off the tip of the frog to find out where it is. Also, if the hoof is really dragged forward, the apex, the frog may be also dragged, and you kind of get a fake apex. So, yeah, on a good hoof, it's pretty reliable. So I'm gonna make a mark here, more or less, and 1 inch back, you're gonna find the center of the hoof. And it should kind of be where the bars are starting to come out. And if I follow the bars down, it kind of matches the center of the hoof. Now, when I find the center of the hoof, I make a mark at the back part of the hoof, and I measure and try to get a straight line, which is not always very easy, but she's more or less like 5.5, maybe a little bit more. And I'm gonna go up here, and now I can see 5.5, maximum 6. It's to find out how much the toe has grown. So you want kind of the center of the hoof to be in the center. So if she's 5.5 this way, almost 6, and she's all the way out here, you know, she's 7.5. So her breakover should really be back to this. And that really matches with the hoof wall going around here. All of this is gonna be cut off. And then her breakover will be pretty balanced and nice compared to the rest. So that's good. So with her, she's got really balanced feet. And so I'm not measuring that much, you know. On a horse that's doing more a corrective trimming, I'm measuring the hoof wall on the outside. I'm doing a lot more measurements to be sure I'm trimming correctly. But with her, with such good feet, I can kind of just trim and just look at the outside and be careful with like this pillar like I showed you before. It's a bit too long. So I like to start more or less back here, and I'm holding the clipper like this, so I'm not really trimming off a big part of the heel. And then I just keep the clipper next to the sole, and I keep it pretty flat. And I just start to trim. When I come to the pillar, I'm doing this with the clipper. I'm kind of bending it more down to cut off a bit more. And when I come to the toe, I do it a little more even. And I go to this part, and I cut that off. Come to this pillar, I keep the angle on the clipper like this. And then I move back here. And as I come backwards, I'm kind of tilting the clipper more upright this way. And when I'm back to this area, I keep it pretty flat with the sole. And I'm just cutting off pretty flat. And then when I come back to the heel, I'm really being careful and really doing this. Because I don't want to cut off a lot of the heel. I'm being really careful with that. But she's got a little extra here. I'm gonna take it a little bit more so I don't have to do that much with the rasp. It's a lot easier to use the clipper than the rasp. Another good thing to look at is the depth of the hoof, you know. On her, she's got kind of this bowl kind of shape. It's deep, you know. With a horse that's got a way too long toe, it's gonna be a lot more flat. All of this is gonna be pretty flat, but she's got really good depth, you know. So good feet on this one. All right, the next thing I'm gonna do is to use my rasp to make everything flat, pretty much. And I'm starting back here, flattening out my heels to the mark. I'm not trimming my heels below this point, but I'm gonna go just to my mark at 5 centimeters and keep the rasp flat. And I'm doing the same on this side, keeping the rasp flat, going down to my mark. And keeping the rasp flat on the quarters here. On the side of the hoof, I'm keeping it flat. Alright, when I come to the pillar and the toe, I'm angling my rasp down like this. And I'm kind of locking the hoof with my knee, so it's easier to trim. Alright. Now it's looking pretty good. We're pretty much back at the breakover point where I measured. So this is gonna be good. Well, when I'm kind of at this point, I'm trying to keep the hoof as balanced and flat and equal as possible. If I feel like one side is a lot wider than the other, I'm gonna measure it and try to figure out why the distortion is happening. I'm also seeing right now that I'm just gonna take the bar a little more and find out exactly. Alright, and now I'm just gonna have a look to see if it's kind of higher than the other side or if it's looking pretty balanced. And I'm looking straight down, trying to keep the angle of the leg 90 degrees. And I'm looking straight down at the hoof and checking if I can see anything strange or anything out of balance. And also, like, I trimmed the frog a little bit more here than on this side. So you gotta be aware of that and don't think that this is more high. They're equal, it's just a little bit more frog on this side. And also, you know, these bulbs are balanced and nice. It's not like one of them is pushed up. So it's looking good. Alright, so then all I need to do before I continue is I'm just gonna rasp off and make the rollover all the way around. On the heel I'm careful, I'm just doing a little bit. And as I move forward, I kind of do more and more to really be careful with this toe. Come on, you got food. No complaining. And going all the way around. Also, as I come to the toe, I'm kind of doing almost this angle. And a little bit more this on the side. But on the toe, I'm pretty much almost flat. You know, in the wild, when the horse moves, they're gonna trim this pretty good off just by moving, because the horse is supposed to move like 20 miles a day or something like that. So they will get really good natural trim if they move correctly. You know, also they can get distortions if they have pain and they're unloading some part of the hoof or some part of the leg, or, you know, there can be a lot of reasons for the hoof to get a distortion. So I'm just making it nice and round all the way around, especially on the pillar and on the toe. The pillar is really sneaky, you know. It has a tendency of growing and kind of really dragging the hoof forward. So you gotta be careful with this pillar, make sure it's not getting too like circle round on this particular places here. You know, a lot of the time people try to get the hoof to move back and they trim down the toe, but they don't do anything with the pillar, and it's just gonna hold the hoof in place. And the hoof is not gonna be able to move back if you keep the pillars long. So when I get to the heel, I use my soft part of the rasp, and I'm a bit more careful. You don't want to round the heels too much, you know, because the horse is supposed to land heel first when they walk. So I want the heels to be pretty flat and hard and giving the hoof a lot of support when they land. Okay, so what I'm gonna do now is take her hoof down and we're gonna have a look. Okay. So from the front, wheelbarrow, it's kind of a bit in the way. I may have to go over this side. I'm gonna look. So the trim I did now might be enough to make this pillar fall down, because she had a long pillar on this side. And what I can do is kind of unload it a bit more to make this fall down. But what I'm gonna do is actually measure the hoof well and just see if this side is longer than the other. She's got a pretty nice flat hoof well, but it should be ideally going down a bit as the hoof goes back. So the longest part of the hoof should be the toe, and it should kind of shrink as we move back to the heel. So I'm just gonna be measuring this part and see if it's equal on both sides, and see if it's the same length as the toe, which it shouldn't be. The toe should be the longest part. So I'm just gonna have a look, and she's kind of ticklish with this. Hopefully it's gonna be okay. So I'm gonna take the measuring tool down to the ground and lean it against the hoof. I know, you're really ticklish with this stuff. Alright, so in the front she's like 9. If I take it to the ground, On the side she's 8. And I'm gonna be checking this side as well. And it should not be more than 8. No, it's 8. Alright. And then, you know, you can move it back. And then here at the side it should probably be around 7 or something like that. Yeah. It's 7. And then this side, 7 as well. So right now the hoof is looking good. It's equal on both sides. So I think this trim is going to be enough for this to kind of balance out and get better. But I'm going to keep an eye on it. And if I don't see this drop a little bit, I'm going to come in and take off a small part down there, trim a bit, give her some space at this area. So this part can fold down. You know, but I think this is gonna be, it's going up a little bit. I have to be careful with these pillars, but I'm pretty happy with this trim, I have to say. So another thing you should be careful with is the quarters, because they have a tendency of getting along as well. You can kind of see it on the other hoof. It's kind of the pillar and a little bit the quarter here. And typical wild horses, they have like a little arch up here where the hoof hole is a little shorter. It's because when they turn and they move a lot, that part of the hoof is going to trim naturally. But that doesn't necessarily happen with domestic horses, so on this hoof it looks pretty well. And another thing you can do is kind of feel the hairline and feel it should be kind of soft and smooth all the way around, and at the toe it's usually pretty nice here. And if you come back here, sometimes you will feel like a sharper edge, and that's an indicator that this part is too long, you know. But it feels really nice and smooth all the way around. So this hoof is good. It's good. It's finished for now. And all I need to do is pay attention to this medial pillar and make sure it's not pushing anything out of place. Yes. So here you have the finished hoof. It's looking pretty good. And you know, from the back part, you can see she's got a good heel. She's not walking on these bulbs. And she's got good frog stay. It's nice and straight. Looks really good. And then from the down part, it looks like this. She's got good heel, she's got good frog, she's got frog stay, nice balanced hoof, good depth, pretty good frog as well. You know, another indicator if the hoof is way too long, if the toe has been dragging along everything, they will have a really slim frog. And the frog is actually supposed to be pretty wide, you know, the back part of the hoof should be wide and supportive. You know, so what happens if everything gets dragged forward? The hoof is going to be slimmer, and the heel is going to be tighter, and the frog is going to be really slim. But you see, she's pretty wide and nice. Her frog has got pretty good angle. So this hoof is good. And you know, also she can run on rocks and everything, and she doesn't really care. Some of my other horses with not so good feet, they, you know, prefer to walk on grass and stuff because they don't have hoofs like this. So that's the finished hoof. Alright, so now I'm going to trim hoof number 2. I usually do the 2 front feet at the same time. Sometimes with her, when, you know, she's got good feet, I can do all 4. If a horse has some problems, I probably only do 2 hoofs, maybe just the front or just the back feet, you know. I don't need to do them all at the same time. So I have done one hoof, and now I'm gonna be doing the other. And the first thing I start with is looking at the hoof, looking at the growth lines, the dorsal stripes, and doing a good read of the hoof. Here she's got kind of the same thing happening like with the other. This pillar, the medial pillar, is getting a bit long, and it's kind of pushing up a little bit here on the hairline. But all in all, when I look at the front, you know, the hairline is looking pretty good around. It's not being pushed up too much anywhere. And all these growth lines are pretty nice and balanced, except for this pillar. And this has been pushing up a little bit here, which you can see on the growth lines here. Besides that, everything looks nice. Her vertical growth lines also, they're all going down here. And you can see them all growing in the same direction, growing down in a very good angle compared to the hoof, compared to the foot. And you kind of want the hoof to kind of just continue in the angle of the foot. So from here, when they're standing straight, you just want this to go nice down like a line here, like you can see on this hoof. And it's pretty nice looking on this hoof as well. It's a good hoof. It's a nice angle. She's got good depth. And yeah, it's looking really good. If the horse has really uneven feet, I will be measuring everything a lot more to be sure I get it balanced. But with her, I know she's got good feet. They're typically balanced and nice, so I'm not measuring as much on her. Only if I see some distortion happening. Alright, let's start to trim. Getting rid of all of this stuff. So, well, we start by cleaning out the dirt and everything. Also on this hoof I can see the pillar, you know. It's longer on the medial side than the lateral side. And this pillar is pushing and making a small distortion in the hoof. It needs to go. So I'll be starting with trimming the frog. Getting rid of all this nasty stuff here. And cleaning up the frog, so I'm seeing if the frog is healthy, if it's looking well. You know, some people say you shouldn't trim the frog. And it's nice to have a good big frog, by all means, but you gotta also be careful so the frog is not harvesting bacteria or trash. And the frog is growing equally, you know, as the hoof. All is growing all the time. So you're not gonna be damaging anything by trimming the frog, you know. In the wild, the frog is being trimmed as well, like the rest of the hoof. So I like to just keep it nice and clean, make sure it's not harvesting any trash. Taking off this old, you know, it's like our skin. If we get a lot of dry skin, a lot of skin building up, it's nice to get it off. So the fresh skin under can kind of come out. It's the same with horses. So I'm just getting rid of this hard, flappy stuff right here. You can see it's kind of, it wants to come off. So it's gonna fall off anyway, but it's better to just get rid of it so it's not harvesting trash and other bacteria. Now, when I dig in here a little bit, you can see she's got a little trash coming here because this part of the hoof has been covered up by old frog. You know, for a healthy frog, you need some air coming in. If you got old frog covering up everything, and you're not getting any air in here and in here, or in this part, the central sulcus, you know, it's gonna harvest thrush. And you can see here, she's got a small thrush infection right there. If I didn't clean that up, it might grow into something more bad. Right now, it's nothing to worry about. Alright, so I'm gonna take off the tip of the frog to make sure I find the apex. Right there, getting off this part. And I'm gonna find the apex where the sole merges with the frog. The next thing I like to do is just slightly clean up the bars. Let's see if I get some live bar. You can see there, you can really see the bar coming. Here you can see kind of old bar and sole, old sole coming up. So I'm really not taking off sole. I rarely do that, but I always clean up the bars and make sure the bars has that they have a good angle. You know, the real hoof is inside all of this, so this is kind of the hoof capsule, the part what we see. And if the hoof capsule is wrong, it can distort the hoof, the real hoof inside. This would be for us wearing shoes that doesn't fit. So I use this frog dressing, blue gel formula. It's really good for thrush. And I'm just gonna put on a little bit in this little hole there. Also, I'm looking at this part. I don't like that. It's kind of harvesting some thrush there. Taking off a little piece of this, just to kind of smooth it out a little bit. And you know, this little black spot, that's a little thrush attack right there. But now it's gonna be cleaned with sand and dirt and air, so it's not gonna be a problem. Now the frog looks good, healthy, ready to go. Another thing I'm looking at is the periopal skin, which is the hard skin growing down here. You don't want that to kind of go wild and take over the hoof and take over the heel. So I'm just slightly cleaning that up, making sure it doesn't take over the heel or anything like that. It's not too bad on her. Alright. Next thing, start to measure everything up. First thing, apex, we'll have that there. 1 inch back, we'll find the center of the hoof. And here we can make a line on the back part of the hoof and measure and see if it's the same as the other hoof. And it is. So I'll see here, I'm actually going at 6. She's actually more 5.5-ish. She's between 5.5 and 6. So I'm just gonna make a mark at 6. That will be the rollover or the breakover at this point. And then the heels. For me, to keep the heels at a good length is really important. I'm gonna make a line, a mark at 5 centimeters, so I'm not gonna trim below that point. Five centimeters at that. Alright, so that's gonna fit well with the sole. Maybe we'll find the seat of the corn, which is the part where the heel, the sole kind of merges with the hoof wall around. I'm not too concerned about that, but it's kind of, the seat of the corn is kind of this part here, where you see everything kind of merged together. I'm gonna yeah, when I trim her down, we'll see. Usually I keep the heels a little higher than the seat of the corn to kind of show too much, which sometimes it's nice to make sure that there's no trash in that area as well, you know. But we'll see when I trim her down. Start at this side. Keeping the clipper flat. And with flat, I mean the angle when I, cut, it's gonna be flat out, like with the hoof wall. As I move forward to the pillar, I'm angling the clipper a lot more down. And as I come to the toe, I'm also angling it more down. And that's because, the toe has a tendency of growing forward and pulling the hoof forward, and that's not what we want. In the wild, the horses will trim the toe a lot more because they're moving a lot more than domestic horses. And you can see that her medial side is a little bit higher than the lateral. That's quite normal. The lateral side typically kind of slides out a bit more, and the medial side has a tendency of staying a bit more steep. But on her it's pretty much the same. It's just a little bit more growth here on the medial side. All right. Then we have the hoof. All the excess hoof wall is being trimmed out. I'm kind of, it's nice to go a little bit above the sole. But she's got a really good depth, so I don't have to worry too much about that. I can kind of cut it pretty equal as the sole. And then I just start by flatting out the heels, keeping my rasp flat. And there I'm already at my line, so I gotta be careful. Keeping the heels nice and flat. Keeping the rasp flat all the way on the side. There's my line. As I get to the pillar, I'm gonna angle my rasp down and on the toe and really get rid of this. And here you can kind of see a little bit red. And it's not because I'm rasping, it's because the toe has been a little bit too long. It's kind of like a, I don't know the name in English, but a bruise is what I'm looking for. It's from too much pressure on the toe. So you don't have to worry about that, if you have a really flat hoof with no depth and a very, very thin sole. You gotta be careful when these things are happening, but she's got a really thick sole, she's got good depth, and her toe was getting too long, so this is from pressure on the toe. Alright, flattening out this area as well. And you can see the heel are kind of a little different on this hoof. She might be a little... Just clean out. So this is kind of the seat of the corn back here. Making sure it's not any shit or trash. I feel like this heel is actually slightly higher than the other. I did measure them though. I'm gonna measure a bit more on the side from the hairline. Maybe a bit more, maybe 2 centimeters out. I'm gonna go a little bit more than 5. Yeah, it's pretty much the same actually. But it looks like it's a little higher. She's got a little bit more hoof roll there than on this side. It might just be that this part, you know, it's going a little bit down. She's got a little bit more sole on this. That's why it looks like this heel may be a bit higher, but they're both completely on the mark. I probably don't have to worry about that. Alright, now I'm gonna hold the hoof and just have a look and see if it looks well. Holding the hoof in 90 degrees more or less, so I can look straight down on the hoof. And you know, your eyesight can play tricks, which is why I measure. But your eyesight will definitely help as well. Alright, it's looking pretty good. You know, it's not twisting or turning, and she's not higher on one side than the other. Everything looks pretty well. So yeah, that looks good. Now I'm gonna do the Mustang roll. You know, you don't want the hoof to be sharp here, because then it can crack and get some problems with that, so you just want to round it off. On the heel, I'm being careful. I'm using the soft part of the rasp, and just, you know, a little bit, so it's not gonna crack. But then I use this and making it nice and round. And when I get to the pillar and the toe, you know, I'm going a little bit more, I'm trimming a little bit more, you know, with the rasp angling down a lot more. On the side, I'm kind of just rounding it off, but on the pillar, I'm really getting rid of the excess hoof wall. And on the toe as well. And you know, this from here to here, it's pretty much equal from here to here. Slightly longer on this side, but it's pretty equal, you know. Also, the frog is kind of covering up the heel a bit, so if I take the line a little bit more back where it's actually supposed to be, it's really nice and balanced, this hoof. You know, sometimes you're gonna find the center of the hoof, and you will find that from here to here, maybe it's a lot shorter than from here to here, and you know the toe is really long. Let's see. And then on this side as well, I'm right-handed, so I always have a little bit more trouble using my left hand. But you kind of get used to it. Oh, my hair is kind of in the way. Just looking down to check that it's equal on both sides, more or less. It's not going to be completely perfect, you know, but as perfect as possible. Alright, now I'm just going to have a look again, and see what I think. You know, it's got pretty equal hoof well on both sides. It's got a pretty good shape. And the medial pillar was a little bit long, but now it's equal. So I'm gonna let her put her foot down and have a look. Yes. Good girl. Yes. Oh, I don't know if you can see her, but her friend, her best friend, is waiting at the gate. Alright, let's just have a look. You gotta back up slightly. You can pay attention. Thank you. Thank you. Good girl. Alright, let's have a look. Let's have a look. Looks pretty good. No. Alright, so that's the finished hoof for now. And I'm just gonna pay attention to this area, but I think it looks pretty well. So that's the finished hoof. And the back part looks like this. She's got good frog stay. This is a nice flat angle, you know. She's not walking on her bulbs. The heel is being supported by good hoof wall. And everything looks more or less the way it should look. So these are good feet. Really good feet. And now we're gonna look under the finished product. And it looks like this. I could probably take the bar a little bit more, but they got a good angle going down to the center of the hoof, so I'm just gonna leave them at that. You know, they look well. Everything looks pretty good and balanced. All right. Hey.